What's up, guys? Welcome to the Fantasy Addiction Network. Today we are talking the XFL, the Houston Roughnecks. We are going to be looking at XFL fantasy football player rankings and offensive breakdown of the Houston Roughnecks in this video. So we're not going to waste any time. We're getting right into it. Alright guys, so we're looking at the Houston Roughnecks. We're going to be looking real quick. We'll just start by looking at the head coach because that's going to dictate a lot of how this offensive scheme and philosophy works. So the head coach of Houston Roughnecks is June Jones. He is formerly the head coach of the Canadian football team, the Hamilton Tiger Cats, which is a pretty elegant name for a football team. I feel like I want to sip a cup of tea when I say that. But anyway, in his Canadian Football League team, he definitely has what he call like a run and shoot offense where, I would expect to see 3-4 wide receiver sets pretty often in this team, which I think will bode well for fantasy aspects of the passing game, not so much the rushing game, but we'll break down each spot here one by one. Let's begin with the quarterbacks. Now there's still a little bit of a quarterback battle going on right here, okay? So when the XFL draft first happened, the very first thing they did is the XFL assigned quarterbacks to each team, which, kind of luck of the draw, the teams that got better quarterbacks. So they were assigned a quarterback by the name of Philip Walker. But then in their skill position draft, they basically turned around and in the very first round, they signed Connor Cook. Now, Connor Cook used to play backup to Derek Carr for the Oakland Raiders. And again, this is a really important battle to watch because Connor Cook and Philip Walker are actually pretty opposite and antithetical to one another. Connor Cook is definitely more athletic and gifted, as a standard quarterback, whereas Philip Walker is more of your rushing type quarterback. And given the rule changes in the XFL with things like the double forward pass, there's a chance that we might even begin to see multiple, like 2 quarterback formations. And you can already kind of see that the NFL has began to go this way even without the rule changes when you have a team like the Saints with Taysom Hill, being used all over the field. So I wouldn't be surprised if Philip Walker ended up being used, even if Connor Cook ends up winning the quarterback battle. Again, if I had to place money on it, I think that Connor Cook is the more talented quarterback. They spent more capital. They were handed Philip Walker, and then they actually went out and drafted Connor Cook the very next day. So I think that they saw something in Cook that they want on their team. So if I had to put money on it, I think Connor Cook will be the lead quarterback here. But definitely keep an eye on Philip Walker, see how they use him in the first couple weeks. He might be someone that we want to pick up off the waiver wire going into the season. And speaking more on where players are ranked, if you guys are interested in playing fantasy football in the XFL, I have already created rankings for you. They're absolutely free. Feel free to click the link in the description. It will take you right there. You can either view them on our webpage or download them, or you can go to fantasyaddictionnetwork.com. Make sure you guys use those in your leagues because I'm going to give you all the information that you need to draft a really dominant team and crush your friends in this inaugural season. Anyway, moving on, we'll jump over to the running backs. Now, in this league, it's definitely more about the pass. That's really what the rule changes have ascribed to, making the catch rules more laxed and overall just trying to speed up the pace of play, making teams more likely to go for it on 4th down. You're going to see far more passing in this league than you would typically expect to see in a football game. And with a team like Houston, I think that they've totally bought into that philosophy because when you look at their lead running back, it's Andre Williams. So he's more of a between the tackles grinder back who I think will at least stay fantasy relevant from an aspect of they'll probably get a few goal line touchdowns, but he's not really giving you too much in anything but the between the tackles grinder. Now, granted, with the offensive scheme that you'll see from June Jones, because of the 3-4 wide receiver sets, the run and shoot offense, if you will, that kind of, keeps defenses on their toes, which kind of opens up the ability for a power running back to get a little bit more room. running the ball because they're constantly having to spread out wide and not be able to crowd the line of scrimmage. So assuming their passing game is actually functioning the way that they want, it might actually lead to Andre Williams having more of a surprisingly good season. But given the fact that he is not going to give you that nice floor each week by being involved in the pass game, I think Andre Williams' ceiling is definitely limited, and his floor is possibly pretty low as well. Definitely someone to still draft, but not someone that you're going to be reaching for in the early rounds. He also has a backup, Marquez Williams, so you got two Williams on the team. He's also more of your big-bodied plotter type back, so they're really almost the same guy. I think Andre Williams is just more athletic than him, but they both fit the same mold and profile that you'd expect from like your bigger power back. Neither of them are very good in the receiving game, so I would see Marquez Williams as more of like a spell every couple of drives to keep Andre Williams healthy and fresh, and also more of a handcuff if Andre Williams is supposed to go down. But just given the structure of the way that they built their team, it's looking like they're trying to pass the ball 80-90% of the time, which in this league we'll see if that works, but I think it's definitely an interesting idea. But jumping over to the receivers, since we've talked so much about how much the passing game is going to be important for Houston, we'll begin with Sammy Coates. Now, Sammy Coates, you may remember, used to play for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and eventually lost out to the talent of Antonio Brown and Juju Smith-Schuster, but he had a few good games in Pittsburgh, and really just from an athletic profile, is a complete athletic freak. I think as long as he's been able to maintain his athleticism, he could easily be the top wide receiver in this league. Again, he has the athletic profile of being a dominant player in both the red zone, down the field, and in pretty much any situation. So I think there's a big reason that they spent high draft capital on Sammy Coates, especially considering how much they're wanting to throw the ball. He's still under the age apex right now. He's only 26, so that means he's only got room to grow in his athleticism. So again, as long as he's kept himself in football shape, I think that he could easily be the top receiver in the league. I have him ranked in my top tier for that reason. And again, this team is going to throw the ball a lot, and I think Connor Cook's good enough to keep this team from having to punt every single drive. But there's another receiver here that you want to look at is Khalil Lewis. They actually drafted him right before Sammy Coates. Not nearly as athletic as Coates, but based on the expected pass volume in this offense, I think there's plenty of room for two guys to have a lot of fantasy value. He was their first wide receiver drafted, as I said, but I still think Coates is going to be the better receiver here just because he is a better prospect, and he's shown us more. We don't really have much to show for Khalil Lewis yet, but I mean, we can be surprised. So I think Khalil Lewis is definitely more of a sleeper with potential upside, but I would draft him as my wide receiver too if I end up not getting Coates, if I go a running back or a different position in the first round or two. And then they also have Onta Alexander, who's also a highly athletic and talented receiver who played at a small school and never really got a chance in the NFL. Honestly, I think Onta Alexander will end up being the second best receiver in this team. I think he'll overtake Khalil Lewis over time, and if there's a so-called sleeper category in the XFL, I think Alexander should be at that front of the list there. Again, with just a very highly athletic profile and just looked really good in college, just was never able to get on a team in the NFL to show his potential. But I think that's what the XFL is all about, is finding, uncovering gems that the NFL was never fully able to utilize, and I think that Onta Alexander is a perfect example of that. So grab Onta Alexander in the late rounds of every single one of your drafts. You're going to want him, especially if Sammy Coates goes down. Onta Alexander will become a league winner for you guys. And then I would love to talk to you about the tight ends, but they literally did not draft or sign any tight ends on their team. They're that sold on the concept of running out 3 and 4 wide receiver sets that they don't even have a tight end. So nothing to talk about there. There's not a tight end to draft in Houston, so we'll move on. But anyway, Again, just want to remind you guys, if you're playing fantasy football in the XFL, you can download my rankings for absolutely no charge. You can click the link in the description or go to fantasyaddictionnetwork.com. I will be updating those throughout the offseason up until the time the XFL season starts to make sure you guys have the most up-to-date information, and we'll keep that, news flowing and make sure that our rankings are as solid as they can be leading up to your drafts. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and we will see you in the next one.